I don't remember why I even stayed behind that late. The shop was empty, lights humming in the ceiling, the air carrying the faint metallic bite of oil and rust. Everyone else had gone, leaving the bays silent, except for the ticking of an old wall clock and the creak of the wind pushing against the door. That's when she walked in. I knew her face already. Most people in town did, but not like this. She wasn't a customer I expected. She was the kind of woman who looked like she belonged somewhere else entirely. Dark hair pinned back loosely, a navy blouse that didn't try too hard, and an expression that suggested she carried half a dozen thoughts heavier than the keys in her hand. "Still open?" she asked, voice calm low. "Depends," I said before I could think. "What do you need?" She smiled, but not at me, more at herself, as if she'd expected that kind of answer. She held up her car key, dangling it slightly. "It doesn't start." Again. "I was hoping," she trailed off, letting the unfinished sentence hang between us. I wiped my hands on the rag tucked in my back pocket and nodded toward the bay. "Pull it in. I'll take a look." Watching her drive the car inside, I noticed how carefully she handled it. Not the car, really, but the moment itself. She didn't rush, didn't fumble. There was a steadiness about her, like someone who had already lived through storms I couldn't yet name. I bent under the hood, hands working automatically. She stayed near the door, not hovering, not making small talk, just present. Every so often, I'd glance up and catch her watching me, not directly, but in the way people do when they're listening for something unsaid. "You don't have to stay," I told her after a while, keeping my eyes on the engine. "Maybe I want to," she replied softly. It wasn't the words, it was the pause after them. Too quick to be casual, too slow to be careless. I tightened a bolt, felt my throat go dry. "You can't stay," I muttered, more to the shadows under the hood than to her. She didn't argue, just shifted her weight, crossing her arms. The silence stretched out, heavy but not uncomfortable. My hands moved, but my mind stayed caught on her presence. The faint scent of her perfume, the sound of her slow breathing, the way she made the shop feel less like a place for broken machines and more like somewhere fragile could live. Finally, I straightened, wiping the grease from my palms. "It's fixed. Just a loose connection. Shouldn't give you trouble for a while." She walked over, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes. Lines that weren't flaws, but proof of laughter and years. She reached for the key in my hand, her fingers brushing mine. Brief, nothing more than a passing accident. But it wasn't nothing. "Thank you," she said, meeting my eyes. For a moment too long. I nodded, because words felt useless. She didn't leave right away. She glanced at the car, then back at me, as if weighing something invisible. Finally, she said quietly, almost like a secret she wasn't supposed to give away. "Then let me leave my heart here." And just like that, she turned, stepping out into the night, leaving me in the fluorescent silence with nothing but the echo of her voice. I didn't know why that line mattered so much. Maybe because it wasn't meant to. Maybe because she hadn't rehearsed it, hadn't planned it. Just said it, raw, like a thread she couldn't hold back. But I knew one thing as I stood there, hands trembling slightly over the tools I hadn't put away. I wasn't going to forget it. I didn't expect to see her again so soon. But 2 days later, there she was, standing outside the shop just before closing, holding a box that looked heavier than it should have been. "I'm not here for the car," she said quickly, as if to explain herself. "The bookstore across the street. They had deliveries, and the driver just left this for me. I didn't want to carry it up the stairs alone." Her tone was casual, but her eyes gave something away. Not weakness. She wasn't the kind of woman to show that, but a quiet exhaustion, tucked carefully under her calmness. "Here, let me," I offered, taking the box before she could argue. It wasn't that heavy, but I didn't tell her that. We crossed the street together, the late afternoon light slanting low and golden, throwing long shadows on the pavement. She walked just slightly ahead, as though keeping a safe distance, though not enough to lose me. Inside the bookstore, it smelled of old pages and faint coffee. I set the box on the counter. She brushed a loose strand of hair back and exhaled, the smallest sound, but it stayed with me longer than it should have. "You look tired," I said before I could stop myself. Her eyes flicked to mine, sharp at first, then softer, almost amused. That's not something a young man usually notices. Most just see well. She waved a hand, leaving the sentence unfinished. I wanted to ask what, but she looked away, running her fingers across the edge of the box. They were elegant hands, though I noticed the faintest tremor in the way she smoothed the cardboard, as if she needed something to do. She laughed suddenly, a small, nervous sound. Listen to me. I shouldn't be unloading my weariness on someone who barely knows me. I don't mind, I said, maybe too quickly. That silenced her. She pressed her lips together, and for a moment the air between us thickened with something neither of us was ready to name. I watched the way her shoulders carried themselves, held upright, practiced, like someone who had learned not to let the world see the weight. But her eyes, when she finally looked back at me, betrayed her. They were softer than before, a little glassy, like she was guarding a crack in the surface. You're too observant, she whispered, almost to herself. I shrugged, pretending not to notice the way her voice caught. Maybe I just noticed the wrong things. No, she said quickly, then let the word hang there, suspended between us. The room was too quiet after that. Even the clock on the wall seemed to slow. I became hyper-aware of the closeness, her perfume, faint and steady, the sound of her steady but shallow breathing, the way the light caught the silver strands in her hair. She stepped back a little, as though remembering the distance she meant to keep. Thank you for carrying it. I nodded, though something in me wanted to hold the moment longer, not let her retreat back into herself. As she turned toward the stairs leading to the back office, she hesitated, her hand resting on the wooden banister. A pause. Small, deliberate, like she was fighting against herself. Then she glanced over her shoulder, her voice low but enough to pin me where I stood. You really shouldn't be this kind. And then she was gone, leaving the scent of books and silence behind, and me, staring at the empty space, knowing I'd carry that line with me far longer than the box I'd set down. The rain came suddenly, hard enough that it rattled the shop windows like thrown gravel. I was locking up when I saw her car parked at the curb, wipers working furiously. She sat inside, hands still on the wheel, not moving. I pulled the door open and waved her in. She hesitated, then stepped out, running the short distance with her coat pulled tight, damp hair clinging to her face. You'll get soaked, I said, reaching for a towel we usually used on windshields. She took it with a half-smile, pressing it lightly to her forehead. I wasn't waiting for you, she said, almost defensive. The rain caught me. I nodded, but I knew she hadn't driven off the second it started. The shop felt different with her inside, too quiet, too aware of every sound. The rain on the roof, the hum of the old soda machine, the shuffle of her wet shoes on the floor. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and for the first time, she didn't look put together. She looked tired, not fragile, but undone in a way that felt private. You don't have to stay, I murmured, echoing the first night we met. Her lips curved faintly. And if I want to. I didn't answer. My hands fiddled with the rag in my pocket, twisting it until it was nearly knotted. She noticed. You're uncomfortable. No, I said quickly, then softer. Not with you. That silence again, the kind that presses into the chest, makes breathing feel deliberate. She stepped a little closer, close enough that I could see the droplets of rain still sliding down her temple. You're young, she said suddenly. The word sharp, almost like a warning. I know, I replied. Too steady, maybe. And you're not. Her eyes narrowed at that, not in anger, but in recognition of something she couldn't laugh off. I wanted to say more. That I noticed the faint lines on her hands, the small scar near her wrist, the way her laugh never quite reached her eyes. I wanted to tell her I didn't care about the years between us, that the distance felt smaller than the one she kept building in her silence. But before I could speak, her phone buzzed on the counter. She didn't pick it up right away, just stared at the screen, her expression tightening. Then, finally, she silenced it and turned it face down. I caught a glimpse of the name. Just one word. Daniel. Someone important? I asked quietly. She hesitated, then shook her head too quickly. Not anymore. The air changed. The kind of shift you can't see, only feel, the closeness of something about to happen. Her hand brushed the counter, fingers inches from mine. She didn't move them away. For a heartbeat, it felt inevitable, like the rain, like gravity. But then she drew back, straightening, her voice a little too composed. "It's late. You should go home." I wanted to say I already was home, standing there with her in the half-light of the shop. Instead, I just nodded, swallowing whatever truth had nearly broken free. As she slipped out into the storm, I pressed my palm flat against the counter where her hand had been, as if the wood could hold the warmth she hadn't meant to leave behind. It wasn't planned. Nothing about us ever was. She had asked me to help carry a few boxes into the back of the bookstore. By the time we were done, night had already taken the windows, leaving only the faint glow of the street lamp outside. The shop was empty, but it didn't feel empty. It felt crowded, with everything we hadn't said. She leaned against one of the wooden shelves, arms folded, her eyes fixed on the floor. I sat on the counter, legs dangling, pretending to study the scuff marks on my shoes. Neither of us spoke. Not at first. The silence stretched so long I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, the shift of the old building in the wind. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath all evening. "What are we doing?" she asked finally. Her voice wasn't sharp, not angry. It was low, fragile in a way I'd never heard from her before. I didn't answer right away. My throat tightened, words piling up and falling apart before they reached my mouth. "I don't know," I said. Honest. Too honest. She looked up at me then, and I swear the air changed. Her eyes were searching, almost desperate, as though she needed me to give shape to something she'd been denying. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "You asked me to help." "That's not what I mean." The way she said it, the hesitation, the crack just beneath the surface, hit harder than if she'd shouted. I slid off the counter, standing a little closer than I should have. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that the space between us felt like it was burning. "Do you want me to go?" I asked. She opened her mouth, closed it again. Her hand rose as if to gesture, then fell back to her side. For the first time, I saw her unsure. Not the composed woman everyone else saw, but someone wrestling with herself, losing. "You make me," she stopped. Shook her head. "Make you what?" I pressed gently. Her eyes flicked to mine, then away. Her lips parted, but nothing came. Only silence. A silence so raw it felt louder than any confession. I could hear her breathing, steady but uneven, as if each inhale carried a weight. She pressed a hand to the shelf behind her, grounding herself. "This isn't normal," she said at last. "No," I admitted. "It's not." Her gaze locked onto me again, unblinking, and for a moment I thought she might say it, the thing neither of us dared put into words. But instead, she gave a small, almost broken laugh. "I don't even recognize myself when I'm around you." It wasn't a confession. It was something heavier, a truth she hadn't meant to spill. And as the silence swallowed us again, I realized it was the most devastating thing she could have said, because it wasn't about me at all. It was about her, unraveling in ways she couldn't control. It was quiet again, days after that night in the bookstore. I'd convinced myself she might not come back, that maybe she'd decided to seal off whatever had been cracking open between us. But late one afternoon, as the shop lights hummed and the air smelled faintly of rain-soaked concrete, she walked in carrying nothing but her phone in her hand. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, thumb brushing the screen, as if debating whether to show me something or keep it buried. "Bad day?" I asked gently. Her lips pressed together, not quite a smile, not quite a frown. Then she crossed the room slowly and handed me the phone. The screen was lit up with a voicemail. Just a man's voice, low and strained. "I miss you. I don't know how to stop missing you. Please call me back." I didn't breathe until the message ended. When I looked up, she wasn't watching me. She was staring at the floor, arms folded tight across her chest. "That was 2 months ago," she said quietly. "I never called him back. I didn't ask why. The silence told me enough. He was..." She paused, swallowed, started again. "He was everything once. And then nothing. Like watching a house burn down from the inside, while everyone else still sees windows and walls." Her voice wavered, just once. She steadied it fast, but I caught the fracture. "You remind me of him." she added, eyes flicking up for the briefest second. Not in the way you think. Not in the surface things. It's the way you listen. The way you notice. The words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to protest, to say I wasn't him, that I didn't want to carry someone else's shadow. But I stayed still, letting her speak, because she wasn't talking about me. She was talking about herself, about the part of her that still hurt. I hate that, she whispered. I hate that I see pieces of someone I lost every time you look at me like that. Her hands trembled then, just slightly, as she tucked the phone into her pocket. And for the first time since I'd known her, she didn't try to cover it. I didn't reach for her. I didn't say anything to soothe. I just stood there, rooted in the strange gravity of her honesty. Finally, she exhaled a breath that sounded almost like surrender. You deserve better than being someone's echo. The words gutted me, not because they were cruel, but because they were true in a way I couldn't fight. I nodded, though my chest felt tight. Maybe, I said softly, but it doesn't change the fact that I'm here. Her eyes lifted to mine then, wet, but steady. And in that look, without a single word, I felt the ground shift beneath us. Not closer, not farther, just different, as if the rules we'd been pretending to follow no longer existed. She didn't come by for a week. I told myself it was over, that the silence was her way of setting the boundary we had both pretended to respect. But on the 7th evening, just as I was pulling down the shop's shutter, she appeared. No excuse this time. No broken car, no box to carry. Just her. Can I sit? She asked softly, gesturing toward the small bench tucked against the wall. I nodded, my throat too tight to trust words. We sat side by side, the metal bench cold under us, the air thick with the smell of oil and rain-soaked asphalt. For a long time, we said nothing. Finally, she broke the silence. I can't keep pretending this is nothing. Her voice was steady, but her hands betrayed her, fingers knotting together in her lap, then loosening, then twisting again. I know, I said quietly. She turned her head to me then, studying my face like it held answers she didn't want to hear, but couldn't stop searching for. I don't want to ruin you, she whispered. You're not ruining anything. Her laugh was soft, almost bitter. You don't even realize how much you give away when you look at me. And I take it, even when I shouldn't. The words cut, not because they hurt, but because they were true. Still, I couldn't regret any of it. We fell back into silence, but it wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that swells with everything unsaid. My shoulder brushed hers lightly, and she didn't move away. Her breath caught then, not loud, just a subtle shift in rhythm. It was enough to pull me deeper into the moment. Without thinking, I let my hand fall to the bench, close to hers. She hesitated, then let her fingers slide against mine, resting there, not holding, not claiming, just being. It was the smallest gesture, yet it felt like the entire world shifted on that point of contact. You scare me, she admitted finally, her voice low, breaking. I turned to face her, and for a heartbeat our foreheads almost touched, close enough that I could feel the warmth of her breath, close enough that I could see every line in her eyes. You scare me too, I whispered, and then neither of us moved. We didn't kiss. We didn't cross the line we'd been circling for weeks. But in that stillness, our hands pressed together, our shoulders leaning just enough, it felt like something had collapsed quietly inside both of us. Not destroyed, not broken, just surrendered. The kind of surrender that wasn't loud or dramatic, but inevitable. When she finally stood, her fingers slipped from mine slowly, reluctantly, as if memorizing the shape of the moment before letting go. Good night, she said, voice almost too soft to hear. Good night, I echoed. And as the shop door closed behind her, the silence she left wasn't hollow anymore. It was full, aching, yes, but full, like a truth finally spoken without a single word. It's strange, looking back now. The shop is the same, the lights still hum, the clock still ticks too loud in the silence. But nothing feels the way it did before her. I think about that first night more often than I should. The loose wire under her hood, the way her words slipped out like a secret she hadn't meant to give. Then let me leave my heart here. At the time, I thought she was teasing. I know better now. We never had the kind of story people expect. No sweeping gestures, no dramatic declarations. What we had was smaller, quieter, messier, and somehow that made it more real. She taught me that silence can be heavier than words, that sometimes the most honest truths are spoken in the way a hand lingers, or the way a glance lasts too long. She showed me that love, or whatever this was between us, doesn't always arrive wrapped in certainty. Sometimes it comes like rain, uninvited and impossible to ignore. And me? I learned patience, restraint, the ache of wanting to speak and choosing not to. I learned that sometimes being near someone is enough, even if you don't touch, even if you don't say the thing that's burning your tongue. She once told me, "I don't even recognize myself when I'm around you." I think about that often. Maybe what she meant was that I reminded her of the part of herself she thought she'd buried, the part that still longed, still wanted, still believed she could feel something true. And maybe that's what she gave me in return. Proof that love doesn't care about rules, or years, or what makes sense to anyone else. It just asks to be felt, even if it never gets named. We didn't end with a kiss. We ended with silence and a hand resting against mine. And maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the kind of ending that stays with you, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. So if you've listened this far, maybe you're carrying someone in your own silence. Maybe there's a person you can't explain, someone who changed you without even trying. And if there is, don't rush it. Don't force it. Sometimes the quietest stories are the ones that last longest inside us. Because love isn't always about having. It's about recognizing the rare moment when two lives brush against each other and letting that moment live in you. That's what I'll keep. That's what she left behind.